The cold passed reluctantly from the earth, and the retiring fogs revealed an army stretched out on the hills resting. A river, amber tinted in the shadow of its banks, purled at the army's feet, and at night, when the stream had become of a sorrowful blackness, one could see across it the red, eye-like gleam of hostile campfires set in the low brows of distant hills.
So, The Red Badge of Courage by Stephen Crane. He wrote this book when he was 23 years old. Started it when he was 21, published it when he was 23. And this book is a great example and a refutation, of the old adage for writers to write what they know. This book should be an inspiration because Stephen Crane never experienced war, was never in a battle, and yet he writes what many consider to be the greatest war novel of all time. Stephen Crane wrote this book because he was reading about the Civil War, and he was born 6 years after the end of the Civil War. And so he grew up listening to veterans and reading stories about the Civil War, but he wanted to write what wasn't being said in all these historic, fact-based tales. He wanted to know how the soldiers experienced the war, the psychological aspects, and the grittiness and the realism of the war, the stuff not being expressed in history books. And so he wrote this novel. Stephen Crane, I feel, is more of a poet than a novelist. His best work is Black Riders, which he published right before Red Badge of Courage. And in that book of poems, the images are horrific, but you can see a lot of that in this book. There are many descriptions which stay with you a long time after you're done reading it. He's really good at describing scenes and human behavior that like a film. Like, he's very good at writing what would be a panning shot of a battlefield, or like say in Saving Private Ryan, the image of the soldier getting shot in the helmet, taking the helmet off, looking at the hole, and then getting shot in the head. Like, those images run through this book. One such image I'll read here is when Henry Fleming sees a man shot. Here it is. The regiment bled extravagantly. Grunting bundles of blue began to drop. The orderly sergeant of the youth's company was shot through the cheeks. Its supports being injured, his jaw hung afar down, disclosing in the wide cavern of his mouth a pulsing mass of blood and teeth. And with it all, he made attempts to cry out. In his endeavor there was a dreadful earnestness, as if he conceived that one great shriek would make him well. And those kinds of descriptions are littered throughout the book, especially when he sees the faces of dead men sitting next to trees, their jackets growing green with moss, their faces gray, looking like the dead face of fishes. The realistic portrayal of individuals caught in this madness, in this chaos. Many of these men, they would engage in battle and they would just run away and be cowards. They would get lost in the woods, and when the fighting went back down, they would go back and find their way back to camp. And this is what happens to the protagonist, Henry Fleming, in his first battle. He miserably fails, is a coward, runs away like many others, and has to find his way back to the regiment. In fact, there's a great quote in the book where one of the soldiers says, "The regiment lost over half the men yesterday. I thought, of course, they was all dead, but laws, they kept a-coming back last night until it seems, after all, we didn't lose but a few. They'd been scattered all over, wandering around in the woods, fighting with other regiments and everything, just like you done." Another quality of the book I really like, and which Stephen Crane is really good at. Stephen Crane, as in most great war novels, the book is effectively anti-war and also pro-war. In this book, Stephen Crane has a very subtle hint of irony that runs through the entire book. The most explicit case being the title, The Red Badge of Courage. Well, the Red Badge of Courage is what Henry wants to have. He wants a battle wound to prove that he served his country and fought in the war. Well, he gets a Red Badge of Courage, but the way he gets it is he was interfering with another Union soldier fleeing the battlefield and gets a rifle butt in the head, or in the side of the head, which causes his head to swell up and bleed. And when he gets back to his camp, he tells the other soldiers that it was a bullet wound that grazed the side of his head, and they believe it. And that is his Red Badge of Courage. Not courage, it's actually of cowardice. So when Henry at the end is happy and satisfied and feels that he has proven himself as a soldier and that he's finally a man, whatever that means, he is walking with the army, and it's described at the end. Over the river, a golden ray of sun came through the hosts of leaden rain clouds. Now, is this a superficial happy ending? Is this of hope, this golden ray? Does that symbolize this newfound confidence and valor of Henry Fleming? You can read it that way. I don't think so. What I think is that instead of seeing the glass half full, I read that line as these clouds are finally closing in this last little ray of life, because the battle was fought on a clear sky day, described as the golden sunlight. Now it's slowly but coming to an end. And if this battle is based off of the Battle of Chancellorsville, which most people agree, Stephen Crane wrote about this battle. He talked to infantry that served in this battle. Then you know that in 2 months will be the Battle of Gettysburg, where thousands and thousands of casualties will occur. The Union will lose the first 2 days of the war, and the third and final day will be Pickett's charge, and the Confederacy will ultimately lose that battle and lose the war. Will Henry Fleming survive that war? Well, we're not given much confidence from this book that he is a competent soldier, at the least. It doesn't look bright for Henry Fleming's future, and it's just to show that Crane allows the reader to draw their own conclusions from the story. He has a great quote where he says that preaching is fatal to art and literature. If there is a moral or lesson, I do not point it out. I let the reader find it out for themselves. And I think that's very important and very ahead of its time. Stephen Crane was seen as the originator of this naturalism and realism that would be carried out in the 20th century by authors like Ernest Hemingway. And this type of storytelling will also be picked up by the movies. We talk about now about in regards to stories about what would the character do, what is being honest to the character is being the most important thing. The character should control the story and the plot, and the author should be subservient to the character. Well, this was what Stephen Crane made popular and ushered forth. So I'm going to end this video by just going through 3 good things and 3 bad things about this novel, and then giving my rating of it as a whole. Okay, so 3 good things. One is the imagery. The imagery is the way he describes the landscape and these battlefields and these soldiers, their thoughts, their behavior is just it's so poetic and it's so vivid and stark and real. That is really the selling point of this book. It's really an epic poem of and Stephen Crane is he is first and foremost a poet, as opposed to a novelist. And you get just these great mental images in this book that makes you feel like you were there. The second good thing is that he does a great job of putting himself in the shoes of these soldiers and what they talk about and how they think and their little gossipings and all that stuff just seems so natural. I can understand how people thought that Stephen Crane was actually in the war and experienced this firsthand, because it's amazing how he just imagined all this stuff, or he took clips of it from other stories and integrated it into this story. That is really, you feel it's just really accurate and really authentic. There's a great scene in the beginning of the novel where the opposing armies are so close you can see their campfires in the woods beyond the river. And during the day, the guards from the opposing armies would walk up and down the river on opposing sides, and they would talk back and forth and make fun of each other. And these were soldiers who, a lot of them knew each other, that were classmates or family or friends. And he just describes how, like, on some days the Union soldiers would get angry at the Confederate soldiers after they accidentally let a gun go off, which they swore was an accident. That stuff's just all really great. And the third good thing is that it's not too long. It's only 130 pages, and you can read it in a few days. And I take that it's not War and Peace, okay? Like this is literally it's a condensed first experience of a young soldier in war, and I appreciate stories that you can finish in a reasonable amount of time and digest it, and this book was just extremely easy to read. 3 bad things. If you're looking for a good story or a good plot, you're not going to find it here. The plot is sporadic. It's you're dropped into war. It's more descriptions and reactions to what is happening than any kind of foreseeable arc or chain of events. So you're not going to get like a story that you could, can tell to your friend after reading it. It's really more of an experiential thing. Like I said, it's more like the film Dunkirk, okay, than anything else. Number two, some of the battle descriptions and talk of like the formations and the lines moving forward and retreating and flanking, and a lot of that got somewhat long-winded and confusing. So there's that. And then number three is, because it's primarily an internal conflict, there's few characters, few scenes of like dialogue and stuff like that. So you're really only given one character, and you're not going to get out of this like something you could produce on a stage. But you will get something that you could make a movie of, which I rented the film adaptation Red Badge of Courage by John Huston, who did Treasures of the Sierra Madre, Maltese Falcon, and I'm looking forward to watching that film, and I'm also going to review that film, make a video of it, and see how it compares to the book. So yeah, this was my first book review, and I hope you'd enjoyed it, and I hope if you read the book or have any opinions on it, to post it in the comments, and I look forward to doing more of these in the future. Thanks for watching.